So the following video is my attempt to add an aquaponic fish tank for my classroom. I'm an 8th grade science teacher, have some counter space, knew that these aquaponic fish tanks were a pretty cool thing, and wanted to be able to build one. So this was my attempt based off of some other blogs. I tried to document all my steps along the way. By no means would I say that I'm a professional. Matter of fact, I'm quite an amateur, but thought that based off my looking around at other people's blogs that this could be something that other people might find interesting. Potentially also give me some feedback about any steps that I missed or obvious things that you might see because you know how to build these things better than I. So with that, take a look through. I made some mistakes that I fixed at the end, so the video's got those changes in it. So please enjoy and let me know if you find it useful or if there's any things that you might change. Thanks.
So the first thing that I wanted to do was build some sort of support system that would take care of the tanks underneath, the grow garden on top of the tanks, and then have area to hang the solar light from above. So what I needed to think about first was a space below. So right down here, that was going to be tall enough for my 10-gallon tanks times 2 and wide enough for the tanks, and then have enough space to fit a light that would illuminate the tanks below it. So and then a little bit of space. So that ends up being about 19 inches to the bottom of the boards. And then that platform is just wide enough for the grow bed that I'm going to have on it. It's made out of cedar. And then above it, the recommended height from what I've read is somewhere between 1 foot to 2 feet with the light, depending on what it is that you're growing. So I'm going to try to hang some sort of bar that I can have that thing move back and forth on, because my light's not quite big enough for the width of my grow bed. So our next step is going to be to drill in some holes so I can have the draining system go back down into the tanks. So the grow tank that the grow bed that I'm going to use is this Sterilite 41 quart bin. As you can see, it's 5 7/8 inches tall, and the recommendation is that, from what I saw, is that your depth of your clay beads should be somewhere between 3 to 8 inches. So we're going to use this, and because I have 2 tanks, I'm going to need 2 drain holes that are going out of it. So I think I'm just going to use that little spot right there, and that little spot right down here, and then I'm going to use this this hole because this is the perfect size, 1.5 inches, in order for me to have my drainage going out of here. And there are my 2 drain holes, ready to have my pipes, my drain pipes, installed into them, and then I'll use a little sealer around the edge to prevent them from leaking. I also need to make the holes run through my bench up there as well, so that they'll drain right down into the tank. Next thing I'm going to do is, now that I've got the holes drilled out of my bucket, I'm going to line them up so this grow bed is centered within my unit here, and then I'm just going to drill right through here and get my holes so that my pipes will fit right through. And these are what I'm using for my drainage pipes. Still have to put a little filtration system on top of them, but that's what we're shooting for here. Okay, there are my 2 holes. Word to the wise that when using a hole driller bit, that getting that plug out of there is a challenge, and to do it the right way is to use a couple screws, drill some holes in that plug, and then use counter pressure to get that thing out. I did not do that, and as a result ended up breaking my bit, and then just sacrificing, because I only need 2 holes, sacrificing that. Won't be able to use that again, I don't think. So anyway, there are good YouTube videos out there about how to properly get the plug out of there without breaking your bit. Okay, now what I did was I set my drain plugs in there to be 3.5 inches from the base. So when I fill this, as you can see, this is 3.5 inches. 3.5 inches. My clay beads are going to come up 4 inches, so they're going to cover that pipe. And I drilled all the way through, and you can see that they are now, hanging out the bottom, and they will refill the tanks below. In order to get those through the holes that I drilled, just used a hammer with a wood block on top to keep it from, fracturing the hard plastic. So my next step is to make sure that I've got these things capped off with some sort of drainage filter device, as well as I've got to seal the bases of the bottom with some silicone. So what I picked up that I've got to kind of retrofit is this hair drain plug, which fits pretty perfectly over the top of this. I'm going to cut away the external part and then silicone that to the top for both of them. So I've got two of those. So now that I've got those cut out with the tops off, I'm actually going to I'm not going to silicone these in. That way I can, they make a nice tight seal around the base of that. Is where water is not going to, it's still going to do its filtering job. And that way if it gets full of gunk, I've got a way to take this trap out and clean it out, give it a rinse, and then just put it back. So I think that's probably smart, because if I silicone that in there, that's permanent, and I'm not going to easily be able to clean that. So I've done that for both of my traps here. It's going to keep any kind of big debris out of my fish tank below and allow, obviously, the water to filter through. Okay, at this point I have just gone ahead and done the silicone around the base of all of that to make sure that nothing's going to seep through once I fill this with water. The silicone that I chose to use is this right here. It's the low odor stuff. It's water ready, so it's not going to deal with, it's not going to be bad for water. You can use it in your sinks, kitchen. Figure it's got to be safe for any sort of plant matter that's going to be growing in it. Plus it's such a small amount that I'm not too worried about that. And obviously also need it to be all set for my fish too. Next piece that I'm going to do is start putting in my pump circulation system. So I found these at Lowe's. They're on clearance in the wintertime here for something like $9 a piece. So I've got two of them, one for each tank. I got the hosing that's going to be attached to them, which is just going to circulate up and spill into my grow beds. So that's my next project. So the fittings on these things are pretty snug with the hosing that I bought. When I try to insert that into here, it's just a tight squeeze. So what I've done is I've chiseled off or cut off the ends to make it a little bit more of a beveled edge to be able to start it and then push it in. So there are my pumps sitting in the bottom corners. I'm having a hard time keeping them anchored down with the suction cups that are on the bottom of their feet, because they're not so strong, and I think that the curvature of the hose is kind of throwing them off. But hopefully once I get everything settled and screwed into the top and then fed into my system here, that they'll just keep settled on the bottom and won't float all over the place. The other thing I bought that is going to control the pumps and when they go on and off, so it's not just constantly running, is this timer. I got to figure out how long I'm going to set it for, but they go on, it's at a 30-minute interval cycle. So I'm going to feed both of them into the timer that's going to go into my plug, so they'll both trigger on and off at the same time and then fill up above in the garden. So the next thing I want to test is just that my sealant is actually going to work. So I filled this with just a tiny bit of water, and I'm watching down here to make sure that no drips are coming, because it's easier to take care of that now before I fill this up with all the clay beads. And it's been this way for about, I don't know, 5 minutes, and all I did was let that sealant dry for about 30 minutes, and it looks like we're ready to fill that with the beads, and then I can fill this in here. I've also put in my aerating stones, so we still, even though this is kind of like a circulating system, we still need to aerate that water. That's going to be good for the fish. Okay, so at this point we have run our pump lines up. I drilled a little hole in the corner of the box, and those lines are now fed, and those are my clay beads that I've got covering all the way up to the top here. The same on the other side. I've got the line that runs up, runs behind, and then it's fed there into the back. So you can see both of those lines are coming in, and that will just kind of circulate around. Now what I might choose to do later on is poke some holes all the way through the line that's running in there. I probably have buried underneath about 1.5 feet of that tubing. And if I perforate some holes, it might disperse the water a little bit more evenly throughout the system here. Those clay beads to fill that tank, or the grow area, are these clay pebbles, and it's the 40 liters, and that was a 41 liter tank. So that kind of worked out perfectly to have that much space be filled by just one of those bags. Next thing I'm ready to do is fill up my system with water. I'm going to fill the top until it starts to drain, and I'm going to fill my bins down here, probably to start with 3/4 full. So I've realized that I've made a flaw here in putting in 2 drain pipes, and that they have to be perfectly balanced in order for them to refill the 2 tanks below. So one system that flows into 2 is not going to work. Therefore I've gone and I've gotten 2 new bins to make these 2 separate systems, which I will show you next. So at this point I've completed the system as far as it recirculating. I've made my changes to having 2 grow beds that each had their own drainage hole and their own refill nozzle. That's coming from this side, and then we have our other one on that side. Those fit pretty well. Those are 34 quart tanks, so same amount of clay beads as before. That kind of fits perfectly. I don't have any extras left over, so that one bag is still probably the right amount to put in there. So lesson learned, not to have one drain tank up above. It's really difficult to get the same drainage, which would then refill these tanks at the same level. So you need some sort of spillover mechanism so that if one tank overfilled quicker, that you'd be able to refill it. Now, actually, that I have 2, I'm thinking for the classroom, it's probably going to be a better scenario. So I can have maybe the left side have one sort of trial going on, with the right side having a different kind of trial. I think the first thing I'm going to try is to try different seeding methods. So I'm going to do the sprinkle method on my left side. And then I've got these little, almost like a fibrous type of nest that you can get seeds in. And I'll do the same vegetable, keep the same amount of fish. But I'm even thinking like maybe as I go on, I can have one tank have more fish with the same sort of crop up top. So anyway, I like now the idea of having 2 separate tanks set up so I can do more testing and experimenting and comparison, especially with the kids. So there you have it. We've got our tanks with our light underneath. We've got our 2 drain ports. We've got our pumps down here that are pumping up right up through the back. The only addition that I might do is have these lines come out and then drill different holes so that it can more equally disperse the water throughout the whole system. We'll see how that goes. That could be even something that I experiment with as well. So the other learning lesson that I had is that if you leave your pipe right here, if you leave this buried in the water, that once you turn the pumps off, it's going to siphon the water back into the tank here. So with the gravity, it's just going to feed it back through the hose, and you're going to lose your water levels in here. So therefore, I'm leaving that up above the water, and it's just going to kind of drain like a spout into it. I'm sure there'll be many more lessons that I'll share with you as I go. I still have to put my light up on top, which could be another part of my experiment where I might have the grow light situated over one for a different amount of time. So I've got to set up some sort of system where I can slide it kind of back and forth between the 2 grow beds below it. So here's my finished product of what I'm going to run into sample mode now. So I'm ready to get the fish in there, which I already have in there. I've got some seeds planted, and now we're just gonna wait to see what happens if I've got it all set. So as we look in, just to review all the systems, I got my 2 tanks. I have 3 goldfish in each tank, about 1.5 inches long. I think the recommendation is 1 inch of fish for 1 gallon. And these goldfish can grow up to about 10 to 12 inches from what I understand. So that is, I potentially have them overstocked right now, but we can always get them to move. And then we've got my grow beds up top. On this side, I've got these cool little pouches here, and then you can put the seeds on the inside. I've got those just set in there. And then on this side, I chose to just do the sprinkle method. So probably hard to see, but I've got dill scattered throughout here, and I've got dill planted on this side with cilantro on this side, and then I've got some lettuce coming. And then I've got my grow lamp up here and then I can move this so I can put it over the other one as well, up on the bar up there. So we can alternate that throughout the day. So that's my system, and I will keep it posted for the end result of how things are growing here after a few weeks. Thanks for watching.